Telangana, 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 Telangana. Hate hate rifle ache nishana. Telangana, 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 Telangana.
Greetings, viewers, to Podcast 25 of Uplink's podcast series. Today, one of the welcome surprises of late 2012. This is Far Cry 3, which is every bit as good as the internets would have you believe. It's not a perfect work of art, but it does what it does extremely well.
Card to my black card. God, I haven't done Sambuca since I was 20 years old.
The opening quotation is from MIA, one of the songs released at the peak of the Wall Street bubble, and that's actually very important to this particular work of art because it is all about neoliberalism and where it landed us.
Passed out. Hold the door! Yo, Jason, get in!
We start with rich brats, whom we may not care about, and then the story changes.
Jumping out of airplanes, flying like birds. That is crazy. I like this phone. So, what do we have here?
Introducing Voss, the single best villain of 2012. Absolutely psychotic character, deeply frightening, but not because he's a papier-mâché cardboard figure.
Well, I hope your mama and your papa really love you, because you two white boys, you look very expensive. And that's good, because I like expensive things. I'm sorry, what did you say? What did you say? Do you want me to slice you open like I did your friend?
Absolutely chilling character, and absolutely accurate. This is a quotation not of a media genre, but a literary genre, the neo-slave narratives and novels of the late 20th, early 21st century.
Keep moving.
The gameplay starts with a quotation from The Slave Escape. This is an important narrative from the classic era of slave narratives and the anti-slave narratives in the 19th century, early 20th century, and also of certain neo-slave narratives. We'll see later that the video game will culminate with the equivalent of the slave uprising. And there's some issues with the ending, and we'll get there when we get there.
Who's that?
Holy shit. Oh, God. I can't do this, Grant.
Jay, look at me. I can't find Lisa and Riley and the others without you. So pull it together. Okay?
Yesterday you were
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, really, you were. I laughed.
You play from the perspective of Jason, who escapes from the pirates and then seeks revenge on them for destroying his family. An interesting character. He's not a military expert. He starts out very weak, but he has to reach deep within and find the strength to resist. One of the really surprising things about this video game is how effective its soundtrack is. Like the theme song you just heard and a lot of the sound effects recur throughout the video game and really make the island space this very creepy and very exciting place, which ordinarily would just be a tourist place and very beautiful and not terribly interesting.
Speaks through the warrior. The path leads to the heart of the jungle. Follow the path, and you will find the answer.
Where am I? What the hell?
You are awake. Well, not all of you. The arm has been deadened to allow for the Tatau. It is brave to swim a storm, but to sunbathe on a beach with pirates, insanity. You have the right to take my life. But no, I will also take yours. I am Dennis.
Jason.
Mangao.
Just some excellent voice acting here. The character of Dennis Rogers is played by Charles Malik Whitfield, an experienced actor of television, and delivers a fantastic performance here as a character from West Africa. And the character of Jason Brody is played by Gianpolo Venuto, who's a Canadian voice actor. Also does an excellent job. And while the overall voice acting is quite good, there are some problems with the depiction of the indigenous peoples of the island, who have their own military organization, self-defense organization, called the Rakyat. And there are some problems with the depictions of that culture that end up bogging down the end of the game, but are less important early on in the game. So first off, you're introduced to the island in the proper way. You simply explore it. So here our character finds his first enemy to shoot. It's just a passing snake. Once you dispatch the snake, you start to loot. This introduces a role-playing game mechanic. This is what role-playing video games do all the time, give you objects and items in the game world to collect. And your next step is to climb the tower. This is the first tower you have to climb. It's relatively simple, but I hope you already get a sense for some of the complexity here. The later versions of these towers become really difficult, and you have a whole set of sort of 3D platforming puzzles. They handled these quite well, by the way. This could have been a very frustrating barrier for players, but I'm not a great platformer myself. I didn't find huge problems in any of these. The later ones are a little tougher, as they should be, but they are doable if you just keep at it. So our hero makes his way to the top, and then you're rewarded with something new. This is actually a quotation from the Assassin's Creed series. You take out the transmitter, and your reward is information. So this is the classic bird's eye view that you find in the Assassin's Creed video games, where you find a special point on the map and you get an entire view of the surroundings. And here it's just telling you certain locations to visit later on and updates your map. Glorious visuals, really wonderfully well done. The tropical island really does look like a living, breathing environment.
Nice ride, huh?
It's done.
Good. Show me a map.
Now, these first missions are essentially tutorial missions. This is a classic feature of video game culture where you're training the player to operate in the game world by using the map, using items, and later on through your first combat sequence where you learn to operate weapons, locate enemies, and fight effectively. So in this case, the player dispatches the last human enemy, and there'll be an attack dog that he'll have to take care of later on. Again, notice the visuals. Beautiful environments, very realistic textures, an entire world to explore to uncover items, loot, objects which may or may not be of use. And it feels like a lived-in world. A little battered, a little brutal, but an actual place that you might be able to visit someday. So, success. You take over the base, and this is the first in a whole campaign of bases. And of course, as you might imagine, each of these bases becomes harder than the next one, so they increase in difficulty over time.
Everything's gonna be okay, Lisa! They're all gone! You're safe now!
She's not here.
The outpost near Amanaki is under attack. Where is the American prisoner? We lost her. What? She escaped on the west side of the island. I'll tell you about it when we get there.
She escaped.
Jason, you are worthy of the tattoo.
Worthy to walk the path of the warrior.
We found one of your friends at the colonist's house. Dr. Earnhardt to the west. But do not worry. Is he safe there? The doctor will be waiting for you.
To the west. Did he tell you which friend?
No, but we will keep continuing our search for the others. I will radio you if we hear more. Keep your head up, Jason. The tribe is very impressed with you.
Impressed indeed. This is the first moment of what we might call the post-colonial brotherhood of the series, and this befits the narrative material they're quoting from the neo-slave narratives. The neo-slave narratives are a transnational art form. They're becoming particularly important in industrializing nations, which have their own long, terrible histories of direct engagement and fights against slavery, serfdom, and various forms of colonial violence. And the artists are doing particularly impressive things there: the Caribbean, Latin America, South Asia, Africa, and so forth. Now, that said, one of the limits on this post-colonial brotherhood is that it's very strongly marked by masculinity. This becomes a problem later in the video game when the issue of the collective resistance becomes an issue. Now, after learning the basics of navigation and handling yourself in the game world, you're introduced to the skill tree system. And these are all your character abilities. These are not objects you acquire. These are the things that your character can do. And they're conveniently divided up into 3 general categories. And the basic idea is when you go and solve problems in the game world, you achieve certain missions, you defeat certain enemies, you're rewarded with experience points, and then enables you to unlock further items and abilities. And these abilities are very useful at the higher levels of difficulty. When you really need that extra burst or an extra set of abilities, they can be very handy and very useful. And the one ability they give you from the very beginning is the ability to do stealth kills, which really adds something special to this video game. The makers of this video game really did learn something from the Metal Gear series and make sure that you can play the way that you want within the constraints of the open action genre. Now, what makes the skill tree and crafting system work so well is the fact that it's seamlessly integrated with the game world itself. This is a world which is beautiful to explore. You can go anywhere in it, you can explore almost any environment, underwater, over water, and then to a limited extent in the air, though the game does put limits on that because that would make parts of the game too easy for obvious reasons. There are enemy bases that you have to conquer, and half the fun of the game is figuring out how the terrain works, starting to think strategically about the terrain, using it as your friend against the enemies that you have to face. One of the cleverest things about this game is that not all of your enemies are human. In fact, one of the toughest challenges that you'll face in the game is simply dealing with the wildlife. Now, this is completely unrealistic because wildlife don't carry handguns, as we know. But the game designers did something very smart by making the wildlife animals that you encounter very aggressive, very dangerous, and they will swipe at you and they will kill you if you're not prepared. And this adds a whole new element of interactivity into the game world. Half the fun of this world is simply wandering around, trying to hunt things that will give you useful skins and items that you need to craft items, while they, in some cases, hunt you. This is a very thrilling experience, much superior to the average sort of role-playing video game loot and grind, where you're just routinely acquiring a lot of things that are fairly simple to do. Here, the animals sometimes hunt you, and you have to take that into account. Now, at this point, we're introduced to Dr. Earnhardt's mansion. It's the first in several quirky and interesting side characters. Another thing I would note here is that this open world that you're seeing, which is beautifully detailed, also has very realistic weather effects. There's a whole rain and sunshine cycle, and there's a day and night cycle, so some of the nighttime sequences are often quite beautiful. Sunrise and sunset are spectacular.
See anything you fancy? I like the red ones myself. The purples will give you a lift on a grey day. Everything is excellent, really. Oh, not the yellows, don't take them. They're liable to kill you. The mix is not quite right yet. Well, that said, Dr. Earnhardt here, or in and out, as the case may be.
Yeah, I'm Jason. Dennis said you'd be able to help me, that you found one of my friends.
One of your friends? Huh. I am, distilling a batch later today.
What?
Oh, you mean the girl, Daisy.
Oh, it was Daisy.
I assumed you to be speaking in code.
Where's...
Another wonderful moment in this game. Far Cry 3 has these wonderful incidental characters. You might think these characters have no place in a very serious and essentially very tragic game scenario. In fact, it's just the reverse. The more tragic the game is, zombie thrillers, action thrillers, war thrillers of all kinds, the more important it is to have these quirky, interesting comic characters that make us laugh, that allow us to breathe, allow us to draw back for a second and not feel that sense of impending doom. And that actually makes the sense of doom that much realer and more effective in the larger storyline. For all the wonderful things that Far Cry 3 does well, by far the most interesting is the way it transforms stealth gameplay. It does this through a very clever technique, and that is you can tag enemies using your scope. So this is a player-controlled element, and you can use, you don't have to use this, but in most cases it actually pays to sneak around a camp and use your scope to tag enemies, and once you see them on your scope, they'll show up on your radar, and you can put your scope away and you'll continue to see their outlines or their silhouettes. So in the footage that I'm showing right here, you can actually track them and see where they're going and use that against them. It's quite unrealistic, essentially a form of a superpower, and you might think it's game-breaking, but the game design is so well done, and the assortment of tools that you're given is really well designed to the point that it works extremely well, and I would argue that this is the next stage that stealth espionage games need to move forwards towards this, to the ability to track multiple objects on screen at multiple times. And because it's technological power, they put limits on it, and that keeps it fair and honest. The point is, this creates this sense of narrative tension, of watching and being watched. It's the essence of the Metal Gear thrillers. So I'll be very interested to see what the Metal Gear games actually do with this trope, because Kojima himself has said he's interested in open world action games as a form, and the series has been trending towards open action for some time, so it'll be interesting to see what Metal Gear Solid 5 does with this theme. I hope they take it further. Now, for all the wonderful things the game does right, there is the huge, glaring problem of the game's ending, which is broken on a number of levels. The game forgets where it came from. It forgets the strength of the neo-slave narrative and of the post-colonial narratives that it was tapping into. The identification of neoliberalism as the ideology of slave owners. That's a very powerful insight into the malignancy of Wall Street and all its crimes against humanity. And the ending simply jettisons that because I think it doesn't really want to rebel against Wall Street. It goes up to just that level of getting very close to the boardroom, and then it turns away, and it wants to turn our story into a rebellion against that sort of boss layer just below Wall Street. That is to say, the national security state or its other creatures, and it doesn't really get to that next level of critiquing the system as a system. And this is where the game's investment in a certain sort of whiteness and maleness and white masculinity comes back to bite it in a serious way, because it has no real concept of post-colonial brotherhood which transcends American-style race. The Rakyat turned out to be just as problematic as the pirates you were fighting. And so there's a double betrayal here. On the one hand, an inability to transcend first world identity politics. On the other hand, the inability to see the new social movements in the industrializing world. So there's a double flaw there. And the result is that the ending is completely non-credible. Completely silly, self-indulgent, and a wonderful example of what happens when white boys have too much power over digital media and they just run completely amok without any restraint from history. And it's very unfortunate because the game is so successful up to that point, generates tremendous power, tremendous drive, you really want to see justice done. But in the end, justice is all about number one. It's about your own personal sense of justice, and there's nothing more. And the ending just breaks at that point. One final thing to add, there is an important model for how to get post-colonial justice right. And that model is in another video game, Final Fantasy XII, which Square Enix completed in 2006, one of the greatest role-playing video games ever made, and has one of the greatest characters that video game artists have ever dreamed up, and that's the character of Fran. The game world is called Evilise, but she's from a village culture. She leaves that village culture and tells us why that is and how that happens. And the importance of Fran is that she's not just from the village, she is a philosopher. She's thought about the problem of what does history mean? What do we owe history? And in this sequence from Final Fantasy XII, this is something that the writers of Far Cry 3 should have sat down, listened to, and learned from. If you want to design games in the 21st century, you must deal with 21st century geopolitics and 21st century ideology and 21st century critique of Wall Street and 21st century solidarity with the people struggling against Wall Street. What would that solidarity look like? Well, the first step is to think through history and power in a more complicated way. And here's Fran's version of that thinking.
Hey, Fran. Something's written on the wall.
Engraved by someone, it seems. It's quite old. Lo, seeker in days unborn, God-blade bearer. Know you, this tower challenges the sky. Where the watcher, the ward of the three waits, soul hungry, unsated. He without power, want it not. He with power, trust it not. He with sight, heed it not. Rend illusion, cut the true path. In blood, Wraithwall.
The Dynast King?
Does it startle you? The Dynast King took his sword from the Ocuria. It was here he claimed the Nethicite. He must have known he was not the last the Ocuria would choose. He left this for you. Rend illusion, cut the true path. Words of much mystery, yet his blood runs in your veins. Perhaps it whispers to you the truth.
Está en vos cuidarla, completar el ciclo, evitando lastimarla y conservarla en el bien y no en el mal. Confía en tu fuerza y llegarás hasta el final. Eres el elegido, avanza siempre erguido. Evita caminar por el camino destruido. En la vida hay un propósito, busca tu lugar. El tiempo es un juego, apréndelo a jugar. Que hoy es otro día, no es igual que ayer.